This is my recommendation as to how to learn, understand the the codes. I'm specifically talking about New Jersey when I do this, because some of the other states, some sections are missing or different or whatever. But the general gist is essentially what I'm going to get at, because this is the way I learned it, and the way my boss, when I had one, taught me it. So I think it's a really useful way to learn. First and foremost, there's two methods I think that you can do this. One is the layering, right? So you just go chapter by chapter. I would start with the building code, because everything else in my mind, the way I process it, builds off of that. And then I would go to the residential code. And then once you've done the residential and the building, you could start to focus in on some of the more nuanced things when you start getting to like fire, electrical, plumbing, etc. And I would do it chapter by chapter because especially the International Code Council's set of codes, in my mind, really kind of build on to each other. It starts with your building planning, and then it goes to, use and area, height, volume, etc. But let's say, that's not the method you want to use, then that's fine. I would then start with the building code again, chapter 10. Chapter 10 is, in my mind, one of the, I'm not going to say most important, but it's like the most helpful for designing spaces in terms of understanding what's required for getting out of a building. And chapter 10 will kind of guide you to other sections to look at. Like, it'll guide you to chapter 3 for uses, which it'll guide you to chapter 5, to guide you to chapter 6 and 7 as necessary. But chapter 10, in my eyes, is like sort of the first place you should start. After you do 10, then you can jump to 3. 3 will give you uses. Then you can start getting into the minutia as to what is a use of a building or the spaces of a building. Then I would go to 5. 5 will give you heights, areas, limits, and it's all completely based on chapter 3. Not all, but it's really solidly based on chapter 3. Then you can go to 6. Would I go to 6? No, I wouldn't go to 6. I would go from there to 16. So you can understand the loads that come with the uses and the floors and everything else of those spaces. And then I would probably jump to 7, because once you kind of get to there, you want to understand fire rating, and that's all in like 7, like creating fire rated walls, floors, assemblies, etc. And everyone loves the UL, and I love UL too. They have great assemblies that are tested, but there's also prescriptive methods of getting to fire rating, which is all in chapter 7, because sometimes you need an assembly that at least the UL designer or design thing on their website won't get you to. But chapter 7 will get you there. It's assigned fire ratings for materials. It actually has its own sets of wall types and stuff. So chapter 7 is, I think, the next place to go. Then I would jump back to like 6, and primarily for table 601, because that talks about your fire ratings based on distance to other buildings, property lines, etc. And they now separated 601, 602 to 601, 705, I think. But if you've done chapter 7, then you've also gotten that. So yeah, chapter 6 after that. And then honestly, I would jump to the residential code and just chapter 3 all day. Chapter 3, the residential code is a little weird. I mean, it's good and it does sort of the same thing, but chapter 3 has like everything. Like everything is in 3. Everything after that, 3 has your building site planning. It has your fire ratings. It has your construction types. It has your, it just has everything there, right? So then I'd go to 3 in the residential code, and then I'd come right back to the building code and probably do chapter 9, just so you could start to understand fire alarms, sprinklers, fire suppression, all that stuff. Yeah, yeah, that's the way I think that those chapters, those sections, because all of them are going to kind of lead you to other stuff, but those ones will give you a really solid understanding of what your everyday code necessary stuff to build. I don't, this probably might not even be the right word, but to build the most standard stuff, those chapters will kind of get you there. And then for the contractors, especially those that are doing like 1 and 2 family homes, primarily you want to be in the residential code. So this now makes a shift, right? So you guys want to be more in the residential code. You want to know chapter 3. That, again, chapter 3 is where it's at. But then you want to start getting into, honestly, if you do 1 and 2 family homes, just take that and do chapters 3 through 9. I think that makes sense. 3's like planning the building, 4 foundation, 5 5 is floors, 6 is walls, 7's wall coverings, 8 roof ceiling, 9 roof. Yeah, roof assemblies. So it's kind of like the residential code is really just like how you build a building, right? So you just do chapter by chapter. Heck, I would, just do that if you're doing 1 and 2 family. But if you're doing like, for the architects and, engineers to be out there, just mostly architects, but that I would do that sort of previous method, because that gives you a really strong beginning. And then you can get into the rest of it, right? And there's a lot of stuff you can get into. And when you start getting to like the electrical code, the plumbing code, there's a lot of like nuance and specificity in them. I think so if you were doing my jumping around method, the next one I would do is do the plumbing code chapter 7, specifically table 721, and then all that 720, 721, 722 section, because that'll give you an understanding of like how many toilet fixtures is required in a space, and sinks, and per floor and per space and per occupancy, and how to do the occupancy calculation, because you're not going to use the chapter 10 building code occupancy calculation for chapter 7. You're going to use that as a starting point, but it's not the direct relationship to table 721, the plumbing fixture counts. So table 1006 to chapter 720, plumbing 721 table. And that's oh man, this is like Nerd Central right here. You know what? I'm gonna ask. I can't remember his account name, but I'll tag it and see if you agree with me. It's one of the guys that's on TikTok that really talks a lot about the building codes and codes, etc. If you agree with me on this, I think this is like the way I would say, like if I was building a course from scratch, that I'm sure you already have a course, but like if I was doing one from scratch, I think this would be the way I would do it if it was made primarily for architects. And then if one was made primarily for builders, 1 and 2 family, it would be the second, or I guess third method I went through.